Alright, this is going to be a bit of a pain because I don't have a good way to prop up my camera here. But what I like to do whenever I'm drawing Mario is... Okay, so I'm going to start with my art style because I can draw that pretty quickly, and we'll go into the Kotabe if you want to do that. Which, I don't know, if you don't know the term, it's the 2D art that, you see in like Mario socks, Mario mugs, stuff like the back of the box art in the next Mario game. So, for my style... I like to do here. I'll try to hold that up. Now, this may be a bad habit of mine. Let's start with the bill of the hat. And I'll just kind of round the face out. What I learned is that I'll do kind of like two circles. Here, it's not necessarily I guess the circle is somewhat like this, but I'll start with the line. I'll go with a bit of a rounder circle there. And right here, in this part where it dents, that's like the middle of the face. And, oftentimes I'll have to go back and fix the hat because I'll draw the bill at a wonky angle. But for the bill here, I just like to do like a closed off bill. You'll see that in most cartoons or whatever, where like the line of the bill lines up with the outline of the bill. But okay. So I'll draw a line down the middle, which I just use that for a guide for the nose. So I'll start like right in the middle here. I'll draw the nose, and I'll come out, but then I'll make the top of the nose almost like a sharp edge. So I've noticed that from studying a lot of the official artwork. And you always want to make this line longer than the line where the nose starts, because that's just how they do it. But then for how I like to draw the mustache, I don't exactly imagine Mario to be this neat, nice and neat kind of guy. Like, he cares about his appearance, but he's not like going out waxing his mustache tips. That's something I'd imagine more of Luigi to do. So what I'll do is I'll make the mustache rounder instead of giving it that little pointed tip that you'll often see. And you want to do the first 3 bumps towards on one side of his nose. But then you want to do the last 3 bumps. Or rather, whenever you're doing it from a 2D side perspective, you almost never see the 6th bump, like the other end of the mustache. So I'll do 5, like in the official artwork. I'll kind of color that in. And how I do Mario's eyes is it's kind of here. It's kind of hard to hold this and get close enough to the paper, so sorry about that. I'll just kind of start at the top and make a sort of almost like a sharp angle where the top is. I'm not really sure how to describe this shape. This is just something that took practice, but whenever I was designing how I like to draw eyes, I took inspiration from the Zelda manga for Ocarina of Time. I really like how the eyes are drawn there, because they're not like traditional anime eyes, but they have a little more style to them. And so I just kind of like somewhat adapt to that. Anyway, I'm going to try to erase the face line here, so I don't really need that. So his eyes should be somewhat big. Sometimes I draw them too small by mistake. Then, I'll give it the pupil. Oftentimes I'll leave, a little bit of lighting there just to make it look like he actually has a soul. Yeah, I'd say that's good enough for now. And then I'll make the hat round, because, it's Mario's hat, it's pretty round. And then the middle line will stop at about where his sideburn comes in. And normally, for that, I'll just have it come almost straight down, have a little bit of a curve to go along with the face, and have a sharp edge where that side. You know what? I need to fix that. Oops. Made it a little bit too long, but you want it to line up with almost but not quite touching the corner of his mustache. Now that I think about it, I think I made the face just a little too big. So let me fix that real quick. Something I kind of emphasized here is that Mario is very round. He's made up of a lot of circles, and I wanted to reflect that. Anyway, whenever I draw the eyebrows for Mario, normally I'll do just these little lines to the other end of the hat, like so. And you want to make that, I almost want to say a third of the size of the rest of the hat. Here, kind of clean up that line. Like that. And then whenever you get to the sideburn, you want to create a little circle for his ear. And whenever I like to draw Mario, most of the time you don't really see his neck. I always thought of that just kind of uncanny in a sense. Like, obviously, he's a cartoon character. You gotta have a little bit of, but there's just something that feels more human about giving him a neck. That's a little weird to hyperfixate on, but hey, whatever. So I'll give him somewhat small ear, to where you could link up the ear and the chin if you wanted to, and it wouldn't look out of the ordinary, but I like to give him a little bit of a neck. And so from there, I'll draw the shirt collar. I actually learned how to draw shirt collars from studying Charles Schulz, the author of Peanuts. Just kind of do a little V shape or whatever, and then you'll like curl it up there. It's pretty simple, but it's very effective. Because now I got a shirt collar. Maybe I made his neck a little too wide. Sorry about that. I have a bad habit of crooking the neck. You know what? I'm going to have to restart on the neck. Sorry. It's only me. Whatever. You can always improve your art as an artist. And I see this not as a failure, but as a learning opportunity. Always keep that in mind. If you're never satisfied with your art, it's a bit of a problem because you have to be able to celebrate the little things. And I understand. I'm a perfectionist of my work, so I understand being very scrutinizing? I don't know the word. Then I'll give him a little emblem up here, just a little smaller, so it actually looks less cartoonish and a little more human. But obviously, it's a cartoonish art style. But I like to keep things within the possibility that they could exist in the real world. And so, whenever you see somebody with a big half emblem like that, like obviously that's pretty goofy, but this is less goofy. It's a little more grounded, kind of like the movie. Anyway, always make sure to give him these big tufts of hair in the back. He's got a nice head of hair. I made the hat too small. Again, me, the perfectionist. I try to be very specific about proportions, because proportions are always important. Make the emblem a little larger while I'm at it. You can barely see the M on that. But anyway, whenever I draw Mario, I've always liked to keep the full circle for the emblem there, because it always looked weird whenever you've got this weird dome, Like that. Yeah, it's strange. Anyway, so after you draw the hair, I like to make the body. I'll always draw out the circular outline about long enough for there to be about, I'm sorry, it's hard to say, about the size of his head. You want his head to be able to fit where his body is. There we go. And so then I'll just kind of connect the lines from the head to the body, and I'll make a bean shape, which I actually learned from Tyson Hess and how he learns and how he draws Sonic the Hedgehog, which you can find on YouTube. I think it's on the Paramount channel or something. So there, a little bit of an extra thing if you ever want to learn how to draw Sonic in that sort of half anime style that they used for Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars, which was in turn inspired by Sonic CD. There you go. Okay, back to Mario, because this is a Mario art tutorial thingy. I know oftentimes in cartoon characters you'll see the ear. It'll sort of like have a little mark there. Whenever I'm drawing characters, I don't typically tend to do that, because for the style that I normally go with, I don't see that as necessary. I only do it really if they have large ears, which, to be fair, Mario's ear's kind of large here. So you know what? I'm going to shrink that down. But, I just don't see it as necessary whenever I'm drawing in the style that I like to go with. Anyway, so there's your body. Draw the arms. Oh, silly me. Okay. Whenever you're drawing arms and hands, you always want to put your hands where you want your hands to be first and then connect the arms from there. Because if you draw your arm super long and then you'll draw the hand like out here, that's like, it can often look wonky, especially if your arms are different sizes. You never want your arms to be different sizes unless you're drawing somebody like Plastic Man or Mr. Fantastic from Marvel and DC, or DC and Marvel respectively, you know. So, or their arm got cut off. But I actually stick to a lot of the, what I want to call Marioisms. Whenever I'm drawing this version of Mario, I'll keep a lot of the principles whenever Nintendo draws Mario. So for the hands, I always put them, if they're at a side, I will always put them where his legs and his body meet. Speaking of legs, you also want to draw the shoes, which I'm just going to put the outline here right now, just so I know where they are and I can draw them later. As for the hand, sorry, there. Goofed it. I'm not very good at drawing fingers in that angle. But you want to keep them evenly spaced apart. I know some people like to do 4 fingers. I like, and then some people like to do the traditional cartoon 3 fingers and a thumb. I always like to do 4 fingers because, again, I like to have the characters that I draw more believable. Because I've always found it uncanny whenever, you know, you got characters like Fred Flintstone that have 3 fingers as opposed to typical 4, which I get. It's not necessarily necessary when it's animated, but something's always seemed off about that to me. Now, I'm going to skip the fingers, because you can also do it like this, and you get the same effect, and it still lines up with what you're trying to draw. It's really just do a ball. Sometimes I'll put the finger at the back here, just the pinky, and then I'll have the, you know, the glove cuff. Perspective's kind of off. Got to fix the, you know, the glove lines. But a good tip is that your glove lines, they will be at the points in between your fingers. Think of it kind of like that. Anyway, that's not what I'm doing today, because I would take too long on that. This video is going to be long enough as it is. Anyway, I'm going to do the other hand now. I like to do a typical cartoonish hand. For whatever reason, it's a lot easier for me to draw hands whenever you're looking at the fingers rather than whenever you're looking at the back of the hand and trying to draw at the base of the fingers. Anyway, but see how this hand is where it is, and then from there you can guess where you want your lines to be, how long the forearm should be, and do it kind of like that. That looks kind of wonky. But you know what? Actually, I think that arm length is pretty decent. Just gotta shorten it just a smidgen so that whenever it comes down, whenever his arm comes down, it matches up side. Matter of fact, I'm so sorry I keep having to make these corrections. It's kind of hard to like multitask, you know, whenever you're doing something like this. And I have to erase where I originally placed the hand, or at least reposition it, so it doesn't look so strange. So you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have his hand still here, but I'm going to have it resting on his body. It also helps to put the glove cuff first, because that way you know where the arm is going to be, like where the base of where his wrist is. And then that way you can envision, oh, well, since his wrist is there, fingers are going to be up here. From there, kind of do that. And from there, you want to kind of just find a good middle ground for where the length of the arms are. And I kind of like to round it out because, you know, the rest of him is round. It wouldn't make much sense to make his limbs pointy. Just kind of try to keep the thickness consistent. It might be a little tricky sometimes, a little touch and go. It's just, you got to practice it to get it right. And from here, whenever I like to use the collar, generally I like to put the overall straps, like at the base of the collar. So there's your top half of the body. Now, I know that in some very rare cases, he'll have a pocket on his chest, like in the movie, but I don't do that because, again, it's fairly unnecessary. And if you want him to like reach into a pocket or something, whenever my animation's finished, you'll see that I just use hammer space, which is, he'll reach behind his back and then he'll pull a hammer out of thin air as opposed to reaching inside of a physical pocket. Because even so, if you wanted to pull a hammer out of this pocket, you would still have some suspending of disbelief there. It'd still be a form of hammer space because the pocket is so small and, hammer's as big as his head. Okay, so now that I've got that here, now, I am sorry, I don't really have a good tip for how long Mario's legs are. I have to constantly try to fix that. You just gotta get what feels right. Maybe have his arms long as his legs. Not really sure. Okay, whenever you've got his boots almost facing forward like this, something that I like to do, come up here, create a little bit of perspective there, which I actually learned from the movie. On the little cuff, where his pants are. Line in the middle where his legs separate. Put a little line there for where his legs meet his body. And there you go. That's how I draw Mario in my style. And just for the sake of having a few more references, I'll show you. I did post this in the Castle Calamity discussion channel, so you can check out the picture there. There's Luigi. Anyway, going back to this drawing of Mario here, now we move on to the Kotabe style. So it's a lot like this Mario, where I'll start with Bill, but I'm going to try to make it a little better this time. Again, probably a bad habit, but that's just how I've drawn him for so long. And unlike this Mario, this line does not meet the Bill. This line will stop about middle to 3/4 of the way in. And much like how I draw Mario, I'll start the face here, except in most cases, the face it won't have that curve at the top. I think the curve is nice because it shows the physicality of his head. I think that's another thing I learned from the 1986 OVA. I know, I'm such a nerd. Cry about it. I do like to add some shadowing, just kind of where that line ends and just curved around, but I don't meet the bottom of the bill there. And then, again, like my previous Mario, about halfway down through the face, I'll round it out. But here, you know what? Instead of doing it from here how I normally do, I'm going to show the rest of the shape of the head first. So make it basically the same shape as the other Mario, but probably want to add his chin. Make sure it's nice and round, as that's how Nintendo likes to do things. Nice and round. Again, you want to put the line face there just so you have a reference point for where you want the nose to be. Start in the middle. And remember what I said, sort of keep almost a pointed edge where his nose is. Like the corner of his nose, it's almost pointed. Not quite, there's still a roundness to it, but it's not circular. Matter of fact, I will round it out just a little more, but you want to keep that edge there. And again, make sure that line is just a smidgen longer than where the nose starts. And so that I have something interesting that I do whenever I'm observing art and how I want to draw a character is that I'll have constant reference points of comparing where a part of a character is in tangent to another part so that I can keep them consistent. So, for example, sorry, I'm trying to think of a good example here. Let me find, you know what, actually, I think I have an example. Just a moment. Okay, so I have this pretty dope looking Mario controller here. And if you look at the controller, you'll notice that Mario's sideburn, here, let's put it this way so that it's a little more straight. The dent in Mario's sideburn where the parts separate is almost parallel with the mustache. Like you could draw a line in between them, sort of keep that, I don't know, try to keep them lined up in that sense. It's almost symmetrical, I want to say. Or how Mario's eye here never goes past the edge of his mustache. The edge of his mustache is almost like a cage. So imagine an invisible line going from the top of his mustache, where that corner is, or like up to the hat. The eye always stays within that realm. I'm trying to think of another good one here. I suppose that's all I can come up with for now, but basically the idea is I have constant reference points for various parts whenever you don't have a true measurement. And I think that really helps in my art, is constantly checking, does this line up with this? Does this line up with this? So on and so forth. Okay, sorry, I'm so sorry this is dragging on so long. But anyway, back to the drawing. So then what I like to do is take this sort of quadrant and draw the eye. Something to take note on is that the eye is a very smooth oval. You don't want it bent inward or bent outward. It's just up and down. And for the other side, something I've noticed in art is that whenever you have something like a rounded surface, you always want to make the part that's closer to the surface, to the edge of the surface, skinnier, because it's wrapping around rather than looking at it head on. So I'll draw his eye, and I'll make it thinner. It does not touch the edge of his face. Oops. Does not touch the edge of his face. And then from there, I'll draw a circle within the eye. And I'll draw a circle within that eye for, the iris and the pupil. And then I'll go with the hat. So I'll start about the line with his face. I believe that's how they do it. And I'll make it big enough. I believe it's a bit too tall. Sorry, you study the art for long enough like I have, because I'm such a nerd, obsessive nut. And, you pick up on the weirdest little details. And it's not, unlike this picture, the hat isn't necessarily entirely rounded like that. It's a little more straight on the top part. And it's not necessarily triangular by any means, but there's almost a little more of a point towards the top. It's not perfectly round. And you want enough room for the emblem. Which I would say it takes up about 1/2 to 3/4 of the space in his hat. Whenever I draw the M, to do those tilted sort of like, they're offset. And something, again, to note, like how I talked about with the eye, it's thinner towards the curve. The M here, I'll draw a straight line here, but then I'll draw a line that almost goes with the curvature of the hat about here. And from there, from this side of the hat, I'll curve it upward. But then as I go farther along, I'll stick with that curve for the other side. So you get something like that. Anyway, now onto the sideburn. No, actually, let's start with the mustache. So sticking what you observed on the picture of Mario on the controller is that the mustache tip goes just outside the eye. You want to make them very round. Oh, here's a better way to prove my reference point that I was trying to point out earlier with the controller. One of the reference points here is that the beginning of the mustache, it comes up through here and it bends up to the eye. So the point of the mustache is about halfway through the eye, and the other point of the mustache goes almost directly up. You want to keep these things lined up for consistency in your art, because consistency is something I struggled for a very long time with. Oh, what do you know? First try. Oh man, I actually did that beforehand. I checked that just to make sure. Wow. So needless to say, I need to get a life. Anyway, again, the middle of the mustache will be towards the middle of the nose. That would sort of line up. Because, it's a symmetrical mustache. They each have three points. Then again, 4, 5, and you do not draw the other end of the mustache because it's out of sight because the nose is blocking the way. Anyway, let's add some little hair textures here, which I do just by going the curvature of the mustache, color it in, whatever you like, it's your art, do what you want with it. As for the eyebrows, you always want to keep the beginning of the line thinner than the end. And again, sticking my principle, keeping it thinner on the other side. There you go. You know what, again, I made the nose too big. I'm such a perfectionist, but such is the trials of art. Matter of fact, his nose is almost directly lined up with the edge of the bill, if I'm not mistaken. But you can reference the official art to, correct me on that or whatever. So the mouth here, you want to start like in the mustache, come down, and normally there's a line here where his mouth is, just showing that it's not entirely closed off by the mustache. And you got his teeth line, and his tongue. There's his mouth. Come over here. Now, even though whenever I draw Mario, I just keep the sideburn like directly after the bill stops. That's not how Nintendo does it normally. They have a little gap there. But Paper Mario, he has his sideburn also start directly after the bill, but if you look at the controller again, it's not. Wait a sec. Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's so hard to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Whoops, sorry. And while the other side of the sideburn, comes out just a little bit, the longer part does not. It just keeps a consistent curve. Maybe it bends out a bit down here, but this part comes out, but this part is very smooth. But maybe I picked that up from some of the earlier art, because, you know, the art for Mario evolved over the years. What was true for Super Mario Bros. 3, they don't stick by all those same principles for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, you know. They've refined the design over the years, made it better. So now for the ear. And something to note is that Mario's ears, he doesn't have earlobes. I forget the proper term for it. But that's right. He does not have hanging earlobes. He has attached earlobes. That's the correct term. But you still want to make sure that the ear doesn't just blend into the face, because that doesn't look very nice. But you do want it to come down to about where the sideburn starts. So another thing about reference points, the tip of the earlobe will come to about the edge of the sideburn. Maybe not exactly, but somewhere around there. And then as for the other half of the hat, as a matter of fact, let me look at some reference art here, just to make sure. Tubby Mario. Oh boy. Okay, I think this will serve well. Open a new tab. So this is from 1989. You can tell by some of the ways that the boots and the hair is styled. And, like, he has a lighter pigment of hair than he used to. Sorry, no. He has a lighter pigment of hair here than he does now. But the line of the hat, if you were to follow that line, it would go to about the base of the ear. Okay? So and it wouldn't dip too far into the hat, just enough to show that there's some separation there. And the hat always somewhat curves around. Sort of like the top of the hat, in modern times at least, it's almost slightly pointed, but it's hard to tell. As a matter of fact, I think the Mario movie concept art would serve us better here. Mario movie concept art. Oh, that's not very high res. That's not going to serve us very well. Let's see, he's not wearing the hat there. I am sorry this is taking so long. It's a bit tricky to navigate things like this, at least for me, for me personally. Okay, this will do much better. Okay, so if you see here, oh, I don't remember what I was talking about. But again, comes to about the ear, maybe the base of the ear, maybe a little farther. It kind of varies. But, oh, that's right. I was talking about the triangularity of the hat. So you'll see that, like, right here, it's bended. It's not a perfect circle. And you know what? Sometimes you may just have to live with the fact that you can't get it as perfect as you want. Again, part of being an artist and part of improving your art. Anyway, I'll put the little mark in here. So there's the head. And a lot of the principles that I listed for the body apply here too. I'll make the body, a circle, and I'll attach it. I'll make it a bean shape. I'll attach it to the rest. That's more of a Luigi body. That's a bit too tall for Mario. His shoulder's too long. That's what it is. His shoulder's too big. I believe that's more appropriate. You know what? Still. And downsize a little bit. Okay, this is better. A little tuft of hair in the back. Mario's always had bigger hands. Connect the arms. Maybe have him holding a mushroom. I think that's what I'll do here. Just kind of spice it up a little bit. Classic super mushroom. Because you know what? Peach doesn't date short men very often. Let's do that. I always like posing the hands in an interesting or unique way. Have the palm. Again, the cuff or the wrist will rest. Try saying that 5 times fast. The overalls sort of come down to make a wide oval. About halfway down his body. As a matter of fact, it's too long. You know what? I'll skip on the legs because the legs and boots are pretty much exactly how I draw them, except there's no straight edges, it's all curved. So yeah, I'll end it there because this video is long enough. Anyway, thank you so much, and see you guys later.